Noon. Well, hello and welcome to CyberChat's 2025 AARP's Fraud Prevention and Education Series. I'm Strat Maloma, and I'm honored to be your guide for today's conversation on a topic that affects thousands of people across the country, modern money traps. And these can include things like investment scams, crypto fraud, cash app cons, QR code scams, and so much more. Now, often these scams can be very sophisticated, they can be emotionally manipulative, and often very devastating. But today we're here today to shed some light, to share some stories, and hopefully empower you with the knowledge to stay safe and protected from these types of scams. For our conversation, we'll begin with a powerful personal story from someone who's lived through an investment type scam. Then we'll hear from two leading experts in cyber fraud and consumer protection. Please feel free to, as always, we ask you, help us make this an interactive conversation. So we look to you to share your stories, your thoughts, your experiences, or reactions to things that you've heard, and more importantly, ask our questions. Now, before we dive in, just a couple of things I'd like to share with you to help us all have a real great conversation. Please, for audio purposes, we ask that you please keep yourself muted until you're invited to come on and ask your question or to talk to our experts. We also, and if you want to ask a question at any time, please simply use our chat feature or raise your hand feature. And when we get to our Q&A session, we'll invite you to come on live and ask your question. I also want to share that the things that you may hear from our wonderful guest speakers today may not necessarily represent the views and opinions of AARP or the agencies that the folks speak from, but it's their personal opinions and their personal experiences, and we share this for educational purposes. So we thank you very much for acknowledging that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Great. So our first guest today is somebody that I really appreciate, Robert, who is going to join us and share his experience. He has bravely agreed to share his experience as someone who's faced an investment scams. These can often begin as an online relationship and then kind of evolve into an investment type scheme. Robert's story is truly one of trust, betrayal, and resilience. So again, I thank Robert for being here. And Robert, let's get into it. Let's begin. I have a few questions that I think will give our audience an insight in terms of what you experienced. Can you, Robert, to the extent that you're comfortable, please share a little bit about what you experienced?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everyone. So my situation began about a year ago, last October. And I've got actually two kind of parallel situations. First, I had a woman reach out to me through Facebook using a comment on one of my posts, asking a question about a restaurant that I had posted about. And the other was later in of April of this year, and she reached out via LinkedIn and shared an interest in my experience and sharing business knowledge. In both cases, we ended up communicating regularly through WhatsApp, and in some cases, another tool. I'm gonna think about it here. Yeah, well, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but another common
Right,
texting tool. Yeah.
right. Eh,
So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Robert, can you talk a little bit about how the relationship, how the scammer began with you, and what initially drew you in?
Yeah, so the first person, though, I'll just call her October Woman, and the other one I'll refer to as April Woman. The October Woman who came to me through Facebook just reached out and asked questions, and was very friendly, very kind, very interested in shared hobbies, travel, photography, artwork, and so forth. So with her, we just kind of chatted via WhatsApp eventually, fairly regularly. And the other one, as I mentioned, was about business interests, common industries, and so on. And So I also ultimately very friendly, very kind, and seemingly trustworthy. And at the end of the day, I mean, it took a while actually. We communicated fairly regularly, and at the end of the day, though, ultimately they both asked if I was interested in doing crypto investing, and I put October Woman off for quite a while. Actually, I was actually kind of amazed by her persistence over the course of 8 or 9 months. I would say ultimately I invested and experienced the scams with both individuals in the May through July timeframe. So yeah, so ultimately it seemed very friendly, very it wasn't really a romance-based thing, even though I would ultimately consider it pig butchering. It was more of a relationship scamming than romance, but as I had let both of the women know that I was happily married and not interested in any sort of a relationship other than friendly chatter. So
Right. And at some point, Robert, you lost some money. Um, at what point did things start to feel off for you, and how do you feel that these scammers, these criminals, were able to maintain your trust?
yeah, so the October Woman was very knowledgeable. I don't know a whole lot about crypto investing, and so it was actually for me it was kind of an interesting learning. And she seemed very knowledgeable and uh, shared a lot of successful investments of her own through screenshots and various things, and continued to ask about it over course of time. And I said, yeah, no, I'm not that interested. I didn't have anything really to invest, and then the other kind of similar. The other one was different in a way that she didn't personally lead me through investing. She introduced me to someone else, and the other person, she sent me a link to a profile of this person being profiled on Forbes.com, which it seemed. I mean, I obviously I don't know if this was actually the person, but who they were purporting to be seemed very legitimate and very successful and very knowledgeable of investments. And they walked through the processes, and it seemed very, very legitimate. So I'm so sorry, Strat, did you ask about when did I notice that it seemed a little off?
Right? Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, really, there were a lot of red flags, to be perfectly honest with you, that I just kind of ignored and blew through. But just the persistence about investing, the insistence that if I didn't, I would be missing opportunities. And then actually, when I kind of dabbled in it with a little bit of money, just trying the system. So I went through legitimate crypto sites like crypto.com or Kraken and Coinbase. So when I heard from banks about warnings, have people asked you to reached out to you and asked you to send money someplace? It didn't sound like the thing that they were talking about, because they were my own accounts and I was able to put money into them. But it's when I was transitioned to the exchange to do the type of transactions they were talking about, where the exchanges themselves were very kind of suspect. And I was a little worried about that. And I actually, the October Woman, I actually confronted her and I asked her, "Are you trying to pig butcher me?" And she sounded a little offended and said, of course she's going to deny it, right? So, and she did. And so, I mean, ultimately, and she was just saying, I'm just interested in friendship. That's the most important thing, and so on and so forth. But she continued to talk about it, and ultimately, I went forward with investing with her. The other one, the exchange that they sent me to, that they were working in, which they insisted was really great, I felt was somewhat unstable. So I was very concerned about that. But the gains seemed to outweigh the concerns, and so I went forward with them as well. And oddly enough, I think the two situations sort of lended credibility to the other, like to each other, in my mind. So they were doing similar things and using similar tools, and both seemed very knowledgeable. And so I pursued it, and I ultimately did lose quite a lot.
Yes, yes, you did share that, and I'll leave it up to you if you're comfortable sharing the amount that you lost. So I'll leave that in to you. I was going to ask you though, Robert, in terms of technology or platforms, I think you mentioned a few that they use to communicate with you. Did you feel that they were legitimate? Did they raise any concerns for you?
Yeah, so they reached out to me through Facebook and through LinkedIn, and those both have somewhat um, low featured communication systems. So I was fine with moving to WhatsApp. WhatsApp seemed secure and it was fine. The other one actually was Telegram. I couldn't remember before, but it was Telegram, did the same, and it was also fairly secure. So those tools were fine. And then because they were pointing me to things like crypto.com and Kraken and Coinbase, it also seemed very legit because those are very successful platforms that are commonly used within the US. I think the thing that was with regard to the exchanges, which is where transactions were being made. So I was moving money through crypto or through one of those Kraken, crypto.com, or Coinbase to the exchange where they were doing transactions. And those exchanges, I think one of them actually was in Asia, and the other one was, I think it's actually in Canada. So in a sense, it was offshore. And just right off the bat, a red flag is somewhat unstable and no real accountabilities and so forth. So in hindsight, it wasn't very smart to participate in this, but
Folks often share that, or at least they describe a sense of emotional manipulation when it comes to these types of scams. How do you feel that the scammer may have appealed to you on an emotion side, or did they, or to your values? I know you were very clear with them that you were happily married and that you just wanted to kind of to talk business. But do you feel they used any kind of tactics to appeal to your emotions and to your values?
yeah, I would say. I mean, just the kindness and just kind of very complimentary to me, and they were sharing pictures that were just kind of smiling faces and kind of nice places to go visit, traveling, and because we had talked about a common interest in traveling nice places, and so it was really just that, and I think one of the other contributing factors that may have made me more susceptible to the whole situation was my wife was going through a family care situation with a parent, and so she while I was helping her through it, she was very busy, and I had a lot more free time than normal, and so participating in these WhatsApp chats was kind of a nice way to pass the time. So yeah, they were just very friendly and very kind and complimentary of me and my knowledge and so on and so forth.
Right. And then ultimately, when the moment came that you did realize that, this was a scam, how was that, how did that affect you, maybe on an emotional and a financial side?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it was very shocking. I was a little bit angry. I had lost quite a lot, and it was initially the initial loss was with the April person through the the instability of the system. Um, Basically, I was in the midst of a transaction that she was guiding me through. Even though she had kind of pointed me to the other guy, she at some point kind of gained my trust in that she knew enough about it to guide me through a transaction herself. But in the midst of that transaction, the system kind of timed out on me, if you will. And by the time it came back, all the funds were gone. And that was extremely shocking. In the other case, it was actually fairly successful, doing transactions and kind of amassing some crypto funds. But at some point, the system and the exchange, who this person was fairly closely tied to, was asking for fees for the gains, and the fees had to be new money. It wasn't just, oh, take some money out of the existing funds that were already deposited and earned. So to me, it seemed like a ransomware type situation. They locked up my account. If I didn't pay the fees, they would just close it out and treat it like it had been abandoned. And so I was kind of stuck, and I was at this point, I wasn't going to add any additional funds in. It was fairly clear that this was a scam to me at this point.
Thank you, Robert. And looking at kind of recovery, healing and healing, what's that process looking like for you in terms of the emotions, socially, or even financially? How's that looking for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what emotionally making it somewhat tolerable is that I've been fairly open with my wife and my family. And so they're being very supportive, and they were actually aware that this was going on, and they were supporting the idea of me learning and investing in crypto. I guess cautiously, but they were supporting what I was saying I wanted to do. And so that, in that emotionally, and from a family perspective, I've been supported. I have not shared with friends what's happened. Well, only a handful and not in detail. But so in that sense, I mean, at the end of the day, this happened really in July, which is only 4 months ago, 3 months ago. So it's a fairly raw situation. I don't know if there will be any financial recovery. I don't expect anything to come out of any of the reports I've made to law enforcement. I've gone through the FBI side. I went to the sheriff, and the sheriff turned me away. They said, oh, if you've gone to the FBI, then we don't need to participate in this, which was odd. I mean, I think even through AARP, when I reached out to AARP for guidance on this whole scam situation, they suggested to go to local law enforcement. So I was a little surprised by that. And I've also reported it to, I think it was FINRA, one of the financial regulation institutions. So, but I don't expect any financial recovery at all, unfortunately. In fact, we probably are facing a fairly significant tax bill as a result, because I used the funds that I lost came out of an IRA. So yeah, that will be taxed as income when taxes are due next year. So that will not be awesome. And socially, I mean, as I said, I haven't shared it much, so I guess there's not really a social impact. Although today, by sharing my story, I'm hoping that for the folks who are on the call, that I can help you folks avoid a situation like I've been through. And I have to say, I told you earlier that I blew through a lot of red flags. I knew things were up, and things seemed very suspicious. Tools didn't seem to work very well, and but I just continued pursuing it. So.
Which brings me to my final question is, if someone in the audience here is maybe facing a similar situation, or know of somebody who's facing a similar situation, what would you want them to know or to do?
Yeah. So first of all, I would definitely trust your gut. If you're feeling something is off, just acknowledge it. Because I did, and that's one of the reasons why I challenged them on being like pig butchering me. But I just continued through it. So don't allow yourself to blow through red flags. And for me, it was system warnings, like moving funds from like crypto or Kraken to the exchange, those systems automatically flag the exchange as not being a safe place to put funds. But the person I was working with, oh, it's fine. Everything, this works all the time. I use it every day. And so, it was clearly flagged by the legitimate systems. The banks warned me about transferring funds. Have people asked you to do this, and so on and so forth. And because of the situation I described earlier, where it didn't seem like it was the type of transfers they were warning about, I went through it. Suspicious activity. I don't know if I mentioned this, but the April woman actually had to change the method of contact a few times during our engagement. I don't know why. They said it was about security and being safe, but that sounded very suspicious to me. And then I mentioned that the technology itself was somewhat unstable in the exchange for the April woman. So that should have kept me away from it. And then the fact that there's really no accountability, when you enter into an IRA with a legitimate US firm, you do a lot of paperwork and there's a lot of information that needs to be shared. And there's none in the context of the crypto exchange that I was involved with, which again should have been a red flag. And then ultimately the notion of demanding more money, even though what I was initially interested in investing was considered adequate, it just continued to increase. I just stop. Don't pour more money. If you've already gotten started, don't put more money in. And then when it got to the point where they were even saying, "Oh, well, you could borrow funds, you could talk to friends," and I was telling them, "No, I'm not going to talk to friends. I think they would just be telling me that I'd be throwing good money after bad, and I honestly didn't want to take money from friends to do this." So
Robert,
yeah, avoid it if you can.
Robert, thank you very much for your honesty and your vulnerability in sharing your story. It really reminds us that this can happen to anyone. Anyone can be a target. And something we truly believe in is that healing begins with speaking out and sharing with others. So really thank you for being here today and sharing your story to help others. And
All right, welcome.
and please stick around because some interesting questions may come up that you might help us find some answers to. For
Sure, happy.
those listening, I want to ask this question as we go, as we about to meet our next speaker. I want you to have this question in mind. Now, have you ever received a message from a stranger that felt unusually personal or pervasive? Feel free to share, maybe in chat or when we get to our Q&A section, how you responded to it and how it made you feel. Now that we've heard of the human impact of today's topic, let's turn to someone who spent nearly 4 decades fighting back against cyber frauds. Joining us next is Dave Morrow. He's an AARP fraud fighter volunteer, also the president of Plateau Security Advisors. Dave has nearly 40 years experience in cybersecurity investigations and incident response. He's worked as a special agent at the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. He's led cybersecurities for multinational corporations, and he's testified before Congress. Dave, welcome.
Thanks, Strat.
Let's talk a little bit about the tactics that these scammers often use. So, can you tell us a little bit about what you've seen, how you've seen cyber crimes evolve over the decade? What makes these relationship and investment scams so effective today, would you say?
Well, as you see, and Robert, in many ways, kind of epitomized it. Over the years, the technology has made cybercrime, especially cryptocurrency fraud, as well as relationship scams, easier for somebody to get into and much, much, much more lucrative. And we've seen where the technology has matured, where 10 or 15 years ago, an online scammer would be very limited to what tools they had, to having a whole bunch of tools available to them, including artificial intelligence. Many of the things Robert talked about are pretty typical of what we call the playbook of a scammer. in especially in relationship and in cryptocurrency scams. You know, the approach on a public LinkedIn social media kind of thing, and then moving immediately off to Telegram or to WhatsApp. And one of the reasons they do that is for security on their side, because they know that Telegram, WhatsApp, and most of the big social media have artificial intelligence watching for conversations that are indicative of scams and will shut them down. So they move you off of that onto a Telegram or WhatsApp because they're encrypted and only the two parties involved can read them. And they're very hard to trace. So then the technology that they use, the software kits that they use, makes it easy and easier for people who are really unskilled in technology to use them and to introduce themselves into the cyber fraud world. We've also seen the huge growth of what we call scam compounds in Asia, Myanmar, Cambodia, that area, and run by Chinese syndicates, where people not only are calling, hundreds of callers are calling thousands of people a day, trying to do exactly what happened to Robert, but they themselves are victims of human trafficking in many cases. So it's just kind of exploded along with the online technology for our entire society.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave. And so let's talk a little bit about some red flags that we should be on the lookout, especially when we speak about things like using cash apps or Venmo, Zelle, things like that. What should red flags for us be?
Well, if anytime anybody gets an unsolicited call from somebody saying they're from payment app of your choice, Cash App, Zelle, whatever, their support team or their security team, and try and come up with some story about, we think where there's a fraud and we want to use your account, or your account's been compromised and you need to move your money out, and I'll give you a QR code for a wallet to take it to, or whatever the story is. Legitimate companies don't do that. So if that happens, immediate red flag. Or a test payment, they do that too. They'll ask you for, there's something wrong with your account. Let's run a test payment. Take some money out and transfer it over to this account to make sure that payment flows okay. Again, Robert found this out. The pressure to act. If you feel pressured, whether it's a high-speed sales tactic or a scammer, don't listen to it. If it does anything more that makes you uncomfortable, listen to what I call listening to the little voice. Everybody has a little voice in the back of their heads that will tell them when things don't sound right. And I talk to people on our helpline daily who will tell me pretty much what Robert said. I knew there was a red flag. Something was telling me this was wrong, and I did it anyway. And you got to listen to that little voice, because that little voice is there for a reason. If they want you to send money via the app or the gift cards to someone you've never met face to face, that's a red flag. That's not what they're meant for. They're meant for transactions for people you know. And so if it's something like that, again, that's something. And just be skeptical. Be skeptical and don't just take whatever good story they come up with is just that, a good story. If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Absolutely, absolutely. Those ingredients, fear, getting you to be, thinking, using your emotion as opposed to your logic, I think sometimes is always an ingredient in these scams, as you say.
Absolutely.
Dave, something that I think and many others find irritating is, I think you mentioned it a little bit. You go to a restaurant, everybody wants you to scan a QR code to get this information, scan a QR code, and that really puts us in a vulnerable place. So
Yeah.
talking about QR codes, being everywhere nowadays, menus, flyers, donation links, etc. What are some of the risks that we should be aware of, and how can we scan safely?
Well, we've kind of been victims of our own success in technology growth, because we've made it easier for people to use who are not very technically literate. So that all you have to do now with the QR code is point your smartphone camera at it, and it'll pop up, usually tell you what URL or what website it's going to take you to, but nobody really reads those. And so that's a red flag right there. Well, first of all, one of the things that is pretty ubiquitous, in fact, when I lived on the West Coast, we had a big run of it in Seattle, is taking stickers with QR codes and sticking them over legitimate QR codes in menus in restaurants. And these guys did it on the parking meters that had an automated parking meter program that they use, and they stuck their QR code instead of the parking meter company code. And then, I mean, the average user won't be able to read it. You can't read a QR code. That's the whole thing. They all look identical. And so that's been one of the big issues. One of the things we can do to watch out for it is to make sure you check out a QR code, whether it's on a menu or on a parking meter or a sign. That if it's a sticker with a QR code on it, that's a bad sign. If it's a QR code with no information around it to let you know where it's going to go or what company or branding is there to tell you who you're contacting, that's a bad thing too. When you scan it, make sure you look at the URL, the website that it's going to take you to, because they both Apple and Google will tell you, their phones will tell you in the lower corner where that's going to take you. And if you don't recognize it, if it's unrecognizable or it doesn't make sense, then don't go there. And again, I mean, we're not going to get away from QR codes. They're ubiquitous now. But if in the context you are in, that QR code doesn't make sense, then again, the little voice should be telling you, hey, don't do this.
Absolutely. And Dave, can you talk a little bit about what some common myths are about cyber frauds that you'd like to debunk?
Oh yeah. There's one that I hear all the time when I do call center help calls, and that is, well, I don't use, this can't be a scam because I don't use the internet for anything other than email, or I don't have a computer. All I've got is this smartphone. Well, guess what? That's a computer. That's got more power in it than computers 10 years ago had on desktops. So our society just absolutely, unless you have no internet connectivity and don't ever go online for any reason, you can't escape that. And you do use it whether you realize it or not. And even if you don't, your information has probably been compromised in innumerable data breaches of government and commercial sites, where you could be getting calls from people who, even though you're not online, are trying to scam you. So yeah, you don't use it for anything but email, but you're still at risk. That's the big one.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you,
Okay.
Dave. And Dave, you're also going to stick around because I know we're going to have some interesting questions when we come back to you. I really appreciate all the great information you're sharing with us to help us up our digital defense. I want to do a quick check-in with the audience. If you have a question, please pop it in our chat, or when we get to our Q&A section, I'll invite you to come on and ask our guests questions. Also, you're welcome to use the raise the hand feature. Before I introduce my final guest, I want you to think of, let me plant the seed in your mind, and maybe you can think about it as we're talking. Who here has ever used the QR code or a Cash App in the past week? Now, this is what I want you to think about. Did you double check the source of those items before using it? So, while you think about that, let's meet our final guest. It's my pleasure to welcome Steve Baker, who is the founder of Baker Fraud Report and a pioneer in international fraud prevention. He has spent 32 years at the Federal Trade Commission, including 28 as the director of the Midwest region. He has authored about 17 widely cited reports and helped build global partnerships to fight fraud. Steve, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk about the broader landscape of fraud, Steve. What in your from your purview, what are you seeing as some of these of patterns in relationship and investment scams? How are they evolving? How are they changing? But more so, across geography and demographics, are you seeing any changes or patterns developing in those areas? You're on mute. You're on mute, Steve.
We saw a massive increase in fraud since COVID. I mean, it's at least number of reported complaints have at least quadrupled, and it is a very, very serious problem. We're all getting contacted by various frauds every day. I think you mentioned getting text messages that you've gotten several today, scam text messages. We all do emails, robocalls, and who all knows what else. So this is a real huge problem out there, and this isn't just somebody that happened to in the next town over maybe a year ago wasn't paying attention. This is all of us every day. It's really bad in terms of, so we've got some idea of how frequently these frauds occur because people complain to the FTC and to the FBI's Internet Fraud Complaint Center. They compile statistics. We know only 5% of people who've been victimized by fraud, lost money, actually complain to the Better Business Bureau or law enforcement. So you've got to really look that what we see is just the tip of the iceberg. So people are being ripped off. I guarantee somebody here on the phone knows somebody who's in the middle of a fraud. It is, and the biggest one in the world, I'm convinced right now, are I, I hate this term, pig butchering. That's what the crooks call it. I refer to the term crypto romance frauds. So, like a romance fraud, they build a relationship, meet you a variety of different ways, maybe through just a text message, and then they encourage you to invest in crypto. And if I might just a couple things on kind of why that's effective, because one of the things they do is get people to download these bogus apps that are supposedly going to show you where your crypto account stands. And those often have got live customer service. You've got an account number. You've got to log in. It looks very legitimate. It shows your money going up and up and up and up. And people are, wow, they're very excited. And they don't realize that these are totally phony. I think they steal your money from the get go and then it just disappears. And this whole idea that's actually accumulating money is totally bogus. Obviously, those apps can be used for other kinds of frauds. If we have more time, we'll talk about that a little bit. And you mentioned QR codes. One of the ways they get people to contribute money into these systems, these crypto romance frauds, is by asking them to go to a Bitcoin ATM. These are everywhere right now. My local gas station has one. And so you put in $20 bills, go to the bank, get a bunch of money, put in $20 bills. The crooks send you a QR code that you flash on the screen. And that that's the wallet address your money is going to go to. So the Bitcoin ATMs do have more or less generic warnings on them. Don't be fraud, don't be a victim. But the QR code, and so people that aren't familiar with Bitcoin or not into technology, I used to think that those people would never be victimized through Bitcoin, but there's a whole lot of scams that use those Bitcoin ATMs. I saw one story where somebody did a study and they found 93% of the money sent through a set of Bitcoin ATMs was all going to fraud. And of course, imagine if you're a drug dealer, this would be a perfect way to launder money on that as well. So crypto romance frauds are really the big crypto fraud that everybody on the thing call needs to be aware of. And as you said at the outset, it's really useful for everybody that's listening here to become a helper. Talk to their friends, their neighbors, and their relatives about these things. Hey, these things are out there. Watch out. They'll listen to you. I mean, if you're telling them how these sorts of work, you can do a lot of help with your friends and neighbors and relatives to keep them from being ripped off. So I've probably more than answered your question, but let's go on however you'd like.
Thank you, Steve. Really appreciate those insights. I often ask who are the folks who are committing all these frauds and scams. Can you talk a little bit about what role international crime rings play in these scams and how they coordinate this? I often enjoy reading your reports in the Baker fraud report that covers a lot of these and shares some wins sometimes. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, people tend to think that this is just a couple guys sitting around in a motel room that are doing this, but these are inter worldwide organized crime rings, and there's different kinds of crime rings that do different frauds. For example, ATM skimming, it's Romanians that fly into the United States for a couple days, put on some skimmers, get the information, and then fly back to Romania. Romance frauds have traditionally been, those were more or less invented by Nigerians. And Nigeria is a huge country, it's bigger than Russia. And people from Nigeria with lots of education and English speaking skills have moved out into the rest of the world. And there's actually big Nigerian organized crime gangs, often called the Black Axe, that just like the mafia here, kind of helps coordinate a lot of the crimes that go on. The Black Axe even partners with the Italian mafia to run prostitution in Italy, for example. So this is, since you can't go to court if you got another scammer ripping you off, who do you go to? You remember your organized crime stories, you go to the Black Axe. You and some of them are, they are actually violent. There are people that have been murdered, and they also trick people into, they also deal in hard drugs, and sometimes trick romance fraud victims into transporting those internationally. Dave referred to these Myanmar, Cambodia, Thailand organized crime scam compounds that are out there. And that is, I'm quite what the relationship is between them and the Nigerians, I haven't quite figured out. But you've got thousands of people in, for example, Myanmar, who may be from India or the Philippines and have applied for some sort of IT job, and they offer to hire them. They fly to Myanmar, they put them in a cab, they take them to these scam compounds. They're locked in, forced to work 16 hours a day, beaten, and if they don't make enough calls. And it is a huge problem. And these scam compounds seem to be run by China with actually, and they're guarded a lot of the time by the US military. So the UN has done a big report on this. There's a lot of activity internationally. The Chinese government is worried about it because they're also ripping off people in China. Um, but there's a lot of activity there, and it's a very, very bad scene. And we're worried that these scam compounds are going to pop up other places around the world. So the scammers, have better try to sound realistic, but this is organized crime. They share techniques. There's actually Google workplace sites where people teach each other how to do this stuff, share techniques, what works, what doesn't. They've Some of the romance fraud people even have got scripts that could go out 6 months, what to say, how to respond to this, a little poem to put in, and they buy and sell those from each other. So this is, like I say, this is not just a couple knuckleheads trying to make a quick buck. This is very serious. This is organized. This is worldwide. It's not just people in the United States, and they're not easy to detect. A lot of people, I blame themselves and think, well, gee, I should have figured this out. And the reality is, you can't. I mean, these things are very, very clever, and they're very well designed. um, Final point I'll make, and then I'll be quiet. But some ways I think these things are like a magic trick. I mean, we've all seen magicians. If we actually know it's not an occult phenomenon, it sounds very believable, and that we're amazed at what they do. If they stop and show us how what the trick is on the magic trick, you say, ah, that should have been obvious. I should have seen it. Well, you weren't meant to see it. They're experts in you not seeing it. And these guys are just like that. They have figured out any question you might ask. They pretend their feelings get hurt if you ask them questions. And it's, you just, once you see, so when you're scammed, you say, oh my God, I should have seen this. This was an obvious red flag. It wasn't an obvious red flag. You weren't supposed to see it, and you weren't supposed to question the whole thing too much. So again, went on longer than your question maybe pretended, but hopefully that's helpful.
Definitely that is, and no, we don't want you to be quiet. We want you to be loud and speak out and help us stay safe. So I'm going to transition now and take some of our audience questions. The first person I'd like to invite on to come on and ask his question is Carl Freeman. Carl Freeman, are you on with us? You have a concern about restaurant QR codes. Do you want to come on and elaborate a little bit about your question or your experience? Give Carl a second to come on. Okay. Let's go to Betsy. Betsy Baker, are you on with us, Betsy?
Yes, I am.
Thank you for
Hello.
being on. Please feel free to ask your question.
Okay. I asked two questions. So one was about the Facebook, and I keep getting a lot of men trying to contact me using pictures that I'm sure, are not legitimate. And one of them, it was even the photo of a military man who had been on the news that same day. So it was obvious. So uh, I just go in and delete them, tell report it. Is there anything else I can do?
Great question. Great question. For me, and we'll hear from our experts, perhaps look at your privacy settings, who you let view your Facebook page. Also, you can do a reverse Google image search of that image that you're seeing to make sure it's legitimate. But let's hear what other advice some of our experts have today to share. Dave, should we start with you, and then we'll hear from Steve?
Sure. Well, good for you, Betsy, for being able to see that. This is again one of the things that romance scammers or relationship scammers do quite often, as well as crypto scammers, is that they're lazy, right? And so they have, as Steve indicated, they have what we call the playbook, that are instructions, and oftentimes they have samples of pictures that you can use, or they go and find somebody's website, or as in the case you said, a military member that was in the news, and they just go to their LinkedIn site or their Facebook site and steal the pictures and then use them. And that's where the reverse Google search that Strat talked about can help you find those. But blocking them, ignoring them, being very skeptical, and just have a personal policy of never responding to them is the best thing you can do. And just be very skeptical, because there have been studies, and several years old now, that on LinkedIn, for example, some high percentage, like 60 or 70% of the profiles were thought to be false, were thought to be fake. And so, it's really a very sketchy thing to do, to start responding to somebody that comes at you out of the blue, uh, because chances are very, very good that it's a scam. But you're doing exactly the right thing. You ignore it, you block it, you get rid of the email or the text, and move on with your life.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you for that question. And thank you, Dave. Let's hear from Steve. Steve, did you want to add any more to
No,
Betsy's question?
no, I think that's fine. Perfect to just delete them. That's the thing to do. And don't don't get curious. And sometimes people think, well, gee, I'll just try it. I'll just play with them a little bit and I'll be able to figure out if it's a scam. Don't do that, because once they're in, it's not like your normal skills of detecting falsehood are gonna catch these people out. I mean, you're just not going to outthink them. I mean, it's not going to happen. So just delete it. And so, in addition to Facebook, obviously these folks are on dating sites. They're on any sort of social media you can think of. They're on Scrabble websites, are a common way that they meet people. And the most recent thing I have seen is they're sending people text messages like, okay, can you do dinner tonight? And you respond, I have no idea who this is. But they're just sending random contacts, hoping you'll respond, and that they can use that to spark a little bit of a back and forth, and then draw you in and build a relationship that way.
Thank you. All right, the next person I'd like to invite on to ask here their question is PWR Da. PWR Da. You have a question about high pressure sales tactics. Are you on?
Thank you for taking our question.
You're welcome.
Can you hear us?
Yes, yes.
So I'm thinking, I'm not into high risk investments, but I am curious, how can you tell a legitimate investment site? I win the lottery and I have a spare $1 million in my back pocket. And I think, oh, let's see, that's for interest. So how can you tell? Or where do you go if you want Bitcoin or cryptocurrency?
Okay, let's turn to our guests. Steve, would you like to go first, and then we'll hear from Dave?
Well, personally, I would never invest in cryptocurrency. A lot of people have. I think the whole thing is, you remember the Bailey Savings and Loan and It's a Wonderful Life, where they say all this bank is backed up with homes and mortgages and stuff like that. So your money's good. Crypto is not. I mean, there's nothing behind it. I mean, you got to think of crypto, any sort of crypto is essentially it's gambling. You're just, you got to figure that you're going to lose all your money. If you really want to invest in crypto, I don't know, I would go to a bank or somewhere legitimate. We have talked about the most common crypto scheme today. There's dozens of other kinds of crypto frauds. I provided the study I did on this for the Better Business Bureau, but there's crypto things that want to invest in crypto mining. There's Ponzi schemes, there's pyramid schemes. There are supposedly new coin offerings that you can invest in that are simply non-existent. So I just wouldn't do it. And if you really were interested in just like think of it as the equivalent to going to Vegas. And if you're willing to do that, then I would try to make sure that it's a fairly reputable and established crypto company that you're going to. But I tell you, it's a crapshoot. I just wouldn't do it.
Thank you. Dave, anything to add?
Send your money to Strat. He could put it to good use.
I'm always willing to take donations. Thank you. Dave, anything you get to add?
Yeah, Steve and I are like minds. I don't really touch cryptocurrency with a 10-foot pole. It's just, it is just a house of cards as far as I'm concerned. But, a lot of people really want to do this. And there are registered, reputable cryptocurrency businesses. And if you want to gamble your money in cryptocurrency, go to them. Don't have somebody that just appears out of the blue and tells you how successful they've been and tries to introduce you to their Uncle John, who's the guy who's handling the investments and such. That's a recipe for disaster. So find a reputable, Coinbase is good. Some other places are good reference places and can help you. There are many existing investment companies that are now getting into cryptocurrency and crypto investing alongside their other investment vehicles. So, and all of those, if they're reputable, they're going to be registered either with your state regulators or with FINRA, Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. And you can go online and check if he's registered. And this person, if he's not a registered agent, make him go away. Ignore him, hang up on him. Because if he's not registered, he or she is probably a scammer. That's probably one of the best things you can do. And your states all have regulatory authorities too, and you can all check with them.
Great information. So let me just line these folks up. I'm going to invite Julie first and then Elaine to ask their question, and then we'll hear from C. Donnelly. Julie, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question or share your experience? Let's give Julie a second. Julie Corabia, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Okay, let's go to Elaine. Elaine, would you like to unmute yourself and come on and ask your question? Elaine, are you still with us? All right. I guess I think I'll try and summarize Elaine's question. Please indicate again where to find the source of a QR code before scanning it.
You can, as I think they said, when you point your phone or your device at the the camera at the QR code, both iOS and Google operating system has it pop up in the lower, in iOS, it's the lower left-hand corner. That's Apple. iOS is the lower left-hand corner of the screen. It tells you what, it doesn't take you automatically. You have to touch it and kind of approve it. So and it's the same way with Android, Google's phone operating system. It pops up the website just on the screen, and you have to touch it. And so that's what to look for.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Let's see, our next question. Let's see Donnelly. See Donnelly, would you like to come on and ask your question?
Yes.
Would like to? Thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering why the financial institutions aren't doing more to protect customers when they suspect a fraud, an attempted fraud.
Thank you for that question. Let's hear from Stephen. Stephen, what would you how would you respond to C. Donnelly's
I
question?
would really like to see banks do more, and they all say they do some training, especially big banks, maybe hiring people, but it really takes some quite a bit of education for the bank employees to know what to watch out for. And the crooks often, when they keep people on the phone while they're in the bank, which ought to be a red flag for a teller, and they're telling people to lie to the tellers about why they're withdrawing the money. And it's the banks also know, of course, this is the customer's money, and sometimes they're very insistent that they want their money back. I do think banks could do more. They could do more training. They have a lot of high turnover. I think if you go to a small town bank, you're more likely to get somebody that's knowledgeable and helpful. They also sometimes want you to use the ATM machine to put in money or take money out, so you're not actually interacting with a teller. Um, and this is are you the same person who asked about hacking bank phone numbers on the back of Visa cards?
Yes.
Okay. Um, well, there's a couple things that happen there. I don't know that they've actually hacked bank phone numbers. What they do with phone numbers, though, is they will very often, with URLs or phone numbers, they have a number that's just, if you misdial it slightly, it goes to a scam operation. For example, the phone number for Social Security, you may think you're calling Social Security, you've really punched in a button wrong, you're going to a scam call. That's happened to me. And the scammers, of course, design these things so they work that way. Or the same thing with URLs. So, for example, if you put in Walmart with two A's, it's going to take you a tech support fraud that'll freeze up your screen. And so that happens. The other thing that they do is, of course, spoof caller ID. So your caller ID says my local bank, and it's not. But you think it is because the caller ID says so. So you can't really trust the caller ID on those spoofing telephone number stuff. I think they're making some headway on that, but it remains a huge problem. Or you think you're getting a call from the local sheriff's office, and it's not. So you've got to be really suspicious. And the final one I'll say on that is if you're looking for Microsoft tech support. I mean, you may Google Microsoft tech support, you get somebody who shows up at the top of the list, and Microsoft doesn't actually have a telephone number you can have, but there's one that appears, Microsoft tech support, and you call them and you think you're talking to Microsoft, and you're just talking to somebody in India. So doing a Google search for a customer service number of a company can be a very risky proposition.
Yeah, I tell people never, ever just do a Google search for customer service. Go to the website.
Yeah. Well, folks, you know, we have unfortunately run out of time. I've really enjoyed the conversations with each of our guests. So as we wrap up today's Cyber Chats 2025 event, I just want to thank our guests, Robert, Dave, Morrow, as well as Steve Baker, for their courage, their expertise, as well as their commitment to keeping us protected. I also want to thank my colleague, Marissa, behind the scenes for helping us, well, for helping you find out about this event as she handles our communication and also managing our questions in chat. And then I also want to thank you for joining the conversation, for sharing your experiences and asking your questions and your comments. And as they say, scammers thrive on silence. They want us to be scared. They want us to be embarrassed about what happens to us, and they don't want us to share. Unfortunately, today we have spoken up. And with these types of conversations are really designed to help keep us informed so that we can stay protected and help keep our communities protected. So a couple of things that I'm hoping folks will take away from today's conversation is share the information with your community, help help share what you've heard here today. Scammers prey on trust, emotions, urgency, and secrecy. That's always a common ingredient as they target us. Investment and relationship type scams often begin with fake relationships and end up in financial devastation. Whether we're talking QR codes, cash apps, crypto platforms, these can all be exploited. But the more we stay vigilant, the more we can stay protected. We also will follow up this conversation. For those who attended, we'll get an email with some great resources, our AARP Fraud Watch Network, the Baker Report, as well as some scam tracking tools and reporting tools from the Federal Trade Commission and IC3 will be sent your way. In the meantime, if you have any questions about a fraud or a scam, please reach out and speak to somebody. Great people who are there is the AARP Fraud Watch Network. You might even get to speak to Dave, who can help explain to you what's going on. And you can reach Dave at the AARP Fraud Watch Network on 877-908-3360, or simply visit our website. That's aarp.org/fraudwatchnetwork. In the meantime, I hope you stay safe, stay curious, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you for being on today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.